Good morning, all of you super hardworking University 200 students. I did not make a video last week, so I've saved up a number of things I'm looking forward to talking with you about now in the next 5 to 7 minutes in this video. So I want to talk a little bit about last week and then tell you about the upcoming week. Well, the upcoming weeks, actually. So I want to start by just saying thank you for all of the really interesting conferences. I talked with everyone in the class last week individually for 20 to 35 minutes each, some of you more than once. And I thought the conferences were really useful in allowing me an opportunity to get to know you a bit and also learn about your interests and your topic and research question for this inquiry project. I hope that you guys found them as useful as I did. It was really my first opportunity to talk with you one-on-one, so that was great. Let's talk for a moment about Twitter last week. So there was a concept experience that 4 of the sections of 200 participated in last week. It was a 3-day assignment that asked you to do a few different things on Twitter. So the goal, well, I spelled out the several goals of the assignment in the directions, but the primary goal of the assignment was really so that you could see that Twitter has another purpose outside of just posting your regular status, what you're doing each day, that you can really use Twitter to connect with people who share your interests in a professional capacity. So for example, on Twitter, I follow my friends, but I also follow lots of people who work in higher education and look at different innovations that they're coming up with on a daily and weekly and annual basis. And that's the way that I'm able to stay, or one of the ways that I'm able to stay on top of what's happening in this field. So our goals for you with this assignment were not necessarily as long term as that. But what we were hoping you would do is see what other people in your class and other classes are writing about and studying this semester, and find some people who shared your interests, at least in a loose way, but perhaps in a much more specific way as well, so that you could work with those people on your projects, on your inquiry projects, to get feedback in the coming weeks, so that you could collaborate and form a group. Of course, I can just put you in groups, and some of the topics that that some of the people that you'll be working with will share your interest in the topic and some of them will not. But we hoped that you would find some people naturally on your own. And we also saw it as a really good way for you to connect with people outside of your own section, which was one of the our goals in having this class with 6 sections side by side, was that you could meet and work with people outside of your own specific class. So I know for some of you, the Twitter activity worked out really well and that you found interesting groups and made some interesting discoveries about how Twitter can be used. And I know for some of you, it did not work out so well and that you posted your topic and didn't hear back from anyone. So it's okay either way. If you've already looked at your grades from last week, then you already know this. But I basically just gave you credit if you tried. If you skipped the assignment and didn't post anything, then I couldn't give you credit. But if you made an effort, then I appreciate the effort and hope that it exposed you to something new and you got full credit for it. It was as simple as that. So you got 1 grade for the Twitter part of the concept experience and 1 grade for the written part of it, which was the Curate and Reflect blogging assignment. Okay? So that was Twitter last week. Let's talk a little bit about the research assignments. So that was the Research Nuggets 1, or just Research Nugget 1 was due last week. Number 2 is due this coming week, and number 3 is due this coming week. Most of you did the Research Nugget assignment and did quite well on it. I tend to be very lenient on the first research assignment because it's your opportunity to just figure out what you're supposed to do and to practice a bit. So I try to give you some feedback and give you a grade that reflects the amount of work that you've done according to the assignment and according to our goals in this class in terms of research and looking at different kinds of sources. So that assignment asked you to choose 3 quality, credible sources, of which 1 needed to be, or at least 1 needed to be, a scholarly, peer-reviewed source. A few of you did not choose a scholarly, peer-reviewed source, so that was a problem. But most of you did. What I want to talk about mostly is that last step, the synthesis. So it is the final step because it has to come last by nature, but it's the most important step, and it's a really valuable part of the Research Nugget assignment. So when we synthesize, what that means is that we are bringing things together. right? We're taking all these different sources. This week, maybe it was just 3 or 4, but next week you'll have the first 3 plus your new 3 and so forth. So when we synthesize, we're bringing things together. We're looking at commonalities. Where do the sources overlap? Where do you see striking differences between them? So we're not just picking out minuscule little differences. Of course, they're different in many, many ways. But where you find the trends, that's what you're really looking for in synthesis, is trends. And you're going to do a more in-depth and complex synthesis assignment at the end of the research process in the next week or so. But for now, I want you to be thinking about how your sources come together, how they overlap, and how they differ at the end of each of the assignments. So I'd like to see links in this on top of just your citation at the beginning. I'd like to see a link there, but also links in the synthesis part. I mean, you can use links all throughout, and I would encourage you to do that. But in the synthesis part, when you refer to articles, you should try to link back and forth between them, particularly when you're not referring to the 3 that you used for that particular day. So we do want you to be synthesizing more sources than just the 3 that you looked at for an individual assignment. So I want to make sure that that part is really clear. So you're looking outside of the individual day's assignment and looking at the sources as a whole. It could be sources that you looked at all the way back with DIGO during that original assignment. It can be something that you looked at for that day. It could be something that you looked at but haven't written about at all. That's fine. So any source, any credible source, that's where you should be linking to it and talking about it in your synthesis section of the Research Nugget assignment. Okay. So let's talk about citations for a moment. If you were in the regular face-to-face class or even a traditional online section of 200, you would have bought a book called A Writer's Reference. If you took focused inquiry with us here at VCU, you probably already have that book. Hopefully you hung on to it because you needed it for 200. So that book teaches you how to do MLA and APA citations. One of your assignments last week helped you to choose between using MLA and APA for this class. I encourage you to use the style that you'll need in your major. So I know, unfortunately, we're all taught to use MLA because we're taught in English classes in high school how to cite sources, and English is one of the very few disciplines that uses MLA. I come from an English background, so I say that having learned and taught MLA for the better portion of my life, but I've realized in the last few years, in the last 5 to 7 years, that really very few other disciplines use it, and it's not a practical skill for most students. So unless you're studying English or theater, I would very much encourage you to use APA for this class because that's what you're going to need in your major. This is an opportunity to learn it rather than just be told you need to use it, which is what will happen in all of your other future classes. Okay? So if you don't have that book, I've given you a link to something called Purdue OWL. OWL, OWL stands for Online Writing Lab, and that's at Purdue University. It's an excellent nationally or internationally renowned source for how to do citations, and students from all over the world use it because it's well done and free. So that's where you can learn how to do your citations. The thing to remember with citations is that it's always slow, it's always a bit tedious, but it's a very important part of the research process because we always have to document our sources and say where we got the information. So at the beginning of the assignment that you read, or at the beginning of one of the assignments last week, I talked a bit about how Twitter uses citations and how really that's adopting the exact same format that we use in the scholarly academic world. The citation may look a little different, but we're always careful when we retweet someone else's work, someone else's comment, to say where it came from. Same thing happens on Facebook when you share a comment that your friend has made. It doesn't just repeat the comment, it shows where it originally came from. And so documentation is important in all aspects of our lives because intellectual property is a big part of American culture. For us, it's very important where information comes from and who has created it. And so that's sort of the reasoning behind why documentation in academic and scholarly writing is so important. It's also important because it's considered plagiarism not to use it, not to cite correctly. You always must cite your work using proper documentation, and in this class using MLA or APA. So again, if you don't have the Writer's Reference book, take a look at Purdue OWL for your citations. Okay? Talk for a moment about those research assignments. If you didn't turn it in last week, you do need to turn it in now if you haven't already. The research assignments are not assignments that you can just skip and take a 0 if you choose to do that, like some smaller assignments might be. You really do need to complete all of them in order to complete this course. This is the process work. That 30% of your grade for participation in process is composed of commenting on each other's work. So you'll get a grade for that ultimately. And for the process work in terms of research. Okay, so it's a huge part of your grade, but it more importantly is the basis for the inquiry project that you're doing this semester. So you need to stay on top of your research. If you look ahead at the schedule, the daily schedule, you'll see that we're entering week 5, midway through week 8 is when the course ends. We don't have that much more time left, and the pace is going to pick up real quick here because we're going to finish up the research in the next 8 to 9 days, and then you're going to be creating your inquiry project, and the first draft is due quickly, and then the final is due right after it. So if you get there and you really haven't done any serious research and been carefully reading your sources, you're not going to be able to do the inquiry project. You're not going to be able to do all the research and create the project, in the limited amount of time we have. So we've worked really hard to kind of pace out for you. I mean, it's always going to be busy because it's research and writing, and it's summertime, so it's twice as fast as a normal 200 class. But we've tried to pace it out in a way that has traditionally worked in the past. So stay on top of your research. If you miss one, know that you need to get caught up right away. You do need to turn that in. You cannot just take a 0 for it. Okay? That said, the inquiry assignment is posted. I posted it several days ago. It's one of the things I'll ask you to read carefully this week, or to go ahead and do it right now. There's a link to it at the top of our course site, right next to where it says Thought Vectors. It's its own page. So go ahead and read that carefully, because that is your assignment for this class. I'll talk for just a second about it right now. So in a traditional 200 class, you write a 10 plus page paper. So that's 3,500 words is the minimum. And you write it in Microsoft Word, and you submit it either in print or a digital copy to your instructor, and that's the assignment. It's a researched argumentative essay. So in this class, we're doing everything digitally. And so all the ways that we supplement our text are just as important, or almost just as important, as the written element of the project that we're creating. So in this inquiry project, you will create an argument about your topic. Usually that argument, well, always, that argument is the answer to your research question. You may have several answers. You will have several answers to your research question, and each one of those answers becomes a subclaim, or what we call a reason that your claim is true. And that's what makes up the structure and organization of your inquiry project. But I'll start by saying, like the traditional 200 paper, this inquiry project does need to be at least 3,500 words. It does need to have at least 8 sources that you cite, although most of you will use way more than 8 sources in this. And at least 3 of those need to be scholarly or peer-reviewed, although, again, most of you will use way more than 3 scholarly sources. If you don't use, the reason why we constantly fall back on scholarly sources is, A, they're credible, but B, they tend to be in-depth and meaty and substantive, and that's what we're looking for when we are doing research. Our sources that are going to give us a lot of thorough, deep, complex information so that we have something to say in our papers, in our inquiry projects in this case. So I talk about this in the assignment, but in addition to the written text in the inquiry project, you are required to do something digital, to take advantage of digital tools. That's what this class has been all about, is new media. So you should use images, sounds, videos, links, all of those things. Links are especially important, and images are especially important in this inquiry project. But we're asking you to do something else. Surprise us, okay? Do something in this project that we haven't already told you to do. So I'm telling you, use images and links and videos, but do something beyond that. Okay, so I want you to think really hard about what you can do in this inquiry project to be creative and to make yours unique and to make it your own. Okay, something you can do beyond just the polished writing. So the polished writing is a really important part of this project. You do need 3,500 words as a minimum. And you do need to make a really clear main claim at the end of your introduction and follow that with several reasons, subclaims, that explain that main claim and support those with evidence. So we'll look at some writing about what that means in the coming days. But if you've taken focused inquiry here, or any class that takes the place of it, then you know what an argument is already. You've written them before. So in this class, we're just stepping it up a notch. We're writing a more complicated, more thorough, more in-depth researched argumentative essay but it's not just an essay in print. It's one that's digital and it takes advantage of the digital tools. So yeah, our focus for next week is our research. Okay, so you'll find that there's a few less assignments than normal in this coming week, but certainly just as much, if not more, work than we've been doing each week, because we're giving you time to do some thorough and in-depth research. So be careful of the sources that you use. Look hard for good quality sources and stay on top of those research assignments. Okay, so I see that this was not 5 to 7 minutes. I'm on minute 15 right now, so sometimes it takes longer to explain things than I intend. If you have any questions about anything I've said or anything else, I'm always available to talk with you over email or Google Hangout or in person in my office if you're around Richmond this summer. All right, so I'm looking forward to seeing your research this week, and good job to everyone so far. Bye.